Welcome to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast, where we celebrate and share powerful VBAC homebirth stories to inspire and support mamas just like you. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, a VBAC homebirth advocate and mama of 3, and I believe every woman deserves to birth with confidence and trust in her body. In each episode, you'll hear real-life stories, expert insight, and encouragement to help you feel informed and empowered on your VBAC homebirth journey. Let's dive in. Hey, and welcome back to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, and I'm so excited to be back on the mic with you. If you've been missing your VBAC Homebirth inspiration, you are in for a treat because we have some absolutely incredible episodes coming your way. I've been busy behind the scenes lining up some truly amazing guests, and let me tell you, you do not want to miss a thing. It's exciting what's coming up. We've got powerful VBAC home birth stories, including a mama who had a second time home birth after a preeclampsia diagnosis, a surprise breech birth that unfolded beautifully at home, inspiring free birth stories, and so much more. These are real, raw, and empowering birth stories that remind us just how strong and capable we are. And I cannot wait to share them with you. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. These stories are going to inspire you, educate you, and remind you that birth is powerful, birth is sacred, and birth is yours to own. Before I wrap up, I have something special for you. If you are planning your own VBAC home birth or even just exploring your options, I have a free VBAC home birth class available for a limited time only. In this class, I'll walk you through everything you need to know to prepare for a confident and empowered VBAC home birth experience. But it won't be around forever, so grab it while you can. Just head to ashleywinning.com/birth class to sign up. Awesome. I'll see you in this next episode. Hello and welcome to another episode. This is your host, Ashley, and today we have an amazing guest with us. I'm very excited to have Jane Hardwicke Collings today. Thank you for coming on and being our amazing guest today, Jane.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for inviting me. It was so lovely to meet you at the Sunshine Coast Home Birth Conference in Australia just recently.
Yes, it was so nice to meet people in flesh and get to cuddle and see each other and just enjoy the energy of that event. And it was awesome. My first one. So I was very excited to go. Yes. Well, let us know a little bit about yourself. For those who, I'm sure we've got lots who know who you are, and then this will be an introduction for some people to get to know you and into your world.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm a 66-year-old postmenopausal grandma, and I was a home birth midwife for 30 years, from 26 to 56. I basically grew up in the home birth world. And I founded the School of Shamanic Womancraft, which is an international women's mystery school. And I give workshops on the menstrual cycle, the wisdom of the cycles, preparation for childbirth, and menopause workshops. So a lot about the sacred and spiritual dimensions of all of those big rites of passage in our lives. And the School of Shamanic Womancraft offers all kinds of programs, and I'm going off to Mexico and Canada next year, 2025, in May, June, and July to bring my work there. I've just come back from the UK and Europe earlier this year.
Wow, that's amazing. So you get to jet set off around the world and share your wisdom and knowledge with other people.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Such important work as well. I've got 3 daughters, and when I got my period, I was ashamed and I called my dad. I didn't want my mum to know. And I just think of how little I knew, how much of a taboo subject it was. And my mum obviously had the same from her mother and maybe her mother before her. And I really want to do things differently for my daughters. They already know what a period is. They already know, that it's normal. And I suppose I'm trying to instill, while it can be quite an annoying experience, it comes with many positives, which I didn't respect until I was trying to fall pregnant. But there's so much that still haven't, I missed out on through, I think I'll be going through menopause soon. I'm 38, and all the women in my lineage have gone early into menopause. So, as in 38, 39, 40 sort of thing. I feel like I missed a lot of celebration, a lot of love, and I was trying to banish my periods for so long, with hormones, drugs, and
Mm.
I feel like I missed out a lot. So while I missed out, my three daughters will not miss out. And hopefully I can make that a bit of a sacred ritual and celebration and bringing in some power. And I have to learn all the things first. But I'm so grateful that there are women like you sharing this wisdom that was lost or stolen from us for such a long time.
Well, good on you, Ashley. Healing your red thread, your mother line, by changing it with your daughters. That's
Yes,
fantastic.
yes, that's all we can do. Can't change the clock, can we?
No,
But
but we can heal our previous rites of passage.
yes, and that is very interesting because there's so much about the work that you do that is just so different to mainstream and just stuff. And I have a very, very good friend who is a shamanic healer, and I've done a few journeys with her, and I've just come out feeling so rejuvenated and so full of energy. And I think she's an amazing healer. But can you share a little bit about what shamanic work is and
Mm.
how that kind of works with what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's all kinds of shamanic work that all kinds of practitioners do, but in terms of how I do it and how I teach it and what happens in the School of Shamanic Womancraft is we're using shamanic as the adjective to the noun shamanism, which is the origins of all the cultures on the earth. Every culture started with a shamanic shamanism as their beginning. And what that actually meant was really about the interconnectedness of everything. So humans were connected to the earth, the animals, the rocks, the trees, and everything was one thing and all communicating. So another word could be animism, but in terms of using it in regard to the work that I do, the shamanic perspectives as such are the things or pieces of information that are connected to all the other things at once. So we see this hugely also in our rites of passage, the women's mysteries, because our menarche, the menstrual cycle, childbirth, and menopause and death are all shamanic experiences, meaning that they also, the other definition for shamanic is traveling to the other realms. So one might think, oh, what does she mean? But like, when we dream, we go to another realm. And so we can purposely navigate the other realms with shamanic tools, such as the drum or rattles or some way of doing kind of like a guided journey to seek information in the other realms. So basically, that's the way I use the term shamanic. And it's very useful in preparing for birth to look at the shamanic dimensions of what's influencing your birth experience, like before you even get there. So, actually, that's what my very first cesarean taught me.
Mm. Yes, I was so surprised when you told me that you had had a cesarean and that you had had VBACs. And I was just like, how did I not know this? And it was just a surprise to me. So, would you like to share a little bit about your mothering journey and where you started and how you got to this place?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was a home birth midwife when I had my first baby and all the way through my babies. And
Can I say, Jane, when you say home birth midwife, were you traditionally trained or were you trained the way that midwives are trained now?
yeah, no, I was a registered nurse and then did the
Okay.
1 year registered midwifery. I did it at Royal North Shore in Sydney, one of the big hospitals, state
Hmm.
of the art places. And actually, what happened to me during that training when I was 25
Yeah.
was I had a huge awakening to the
Okay.
patriarchy. I saw institutionalized acts of abuse and violence being carried out on mothers and babies masquerading as safety. And I
Yeah.
woke up to the misogynistic practices within the maternity services, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And that's when I went to become a home birth midwife.
How did you, like, there are so many women working in that environment. How did you know that this was wrong? Did you have a deep sense of knowing? Did you feel it in your body? Like, what was, because this must be happening for lots of women.
Everybody, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you chose to make a choice that was to leave.
Yeah.
Do you remember
Oh,
what
yeah.
that was
I
like?
remember exactly. I remember feeling like if I stay here, I am complicit to this violence, and I couldn't do that.
Mm.
And what I saw were that's the way women were treated, talked to, the babies with disrespect. Like I did my midwifery in 1983. And so that's a long time ago. And things haven't really changed that much. In some
Mm.
cases, they're even worse. But this was in a time before the doctors realized that babies felt things. So we
Mm.
were doing circumcisions with no anesthetic. And I had to hold a baby down to have the foreskin chopped off his little penis. And look, the doctor said, look, he doesn't feel anything. He's just going to sleep, when he was totally going into a shock. It was horrible.
Yeah.
So that, but they don't do that anymore. They realize baby feel.
I don't understand that when, even when people say that animals don't feel, it doesn't,
Like,
I don't understand that. Everything
well, it's bullshit.
feels,
Yeah,
it's a good way not to feel bad by doing that, right?
totally. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I just saw all the things that were going on, unnecessary inductions, and you know, um, being encouraged to take drugs when there were so many alternatives to that. And
Mm.
like being a midwife in training, you come in here now just do an episiotomy on her, because you need to do your 5 episiotomies, regardless of whether she needed it or not. So that kind of really bad stuff going on.
Mm.
So yeah, as I said, I didn't want to be complicit and part of that violence. And for me back then, there was an alternative. It's not like it is now. But I'm hoping that we're going to change the way it is now, because it's absolutely ridiculous that women, midwives, need to do whatever it is, 5,000 hours or
Yeah.
something before they can embark on a journey of being an independent midwife. Oops, you're not allowed to say independent. I mean, private practitioner. And by the time that happens, they're completely terrified by the birth
Yeah.
process because of what they witness in the hospital. So the
Yes.
system is not working in that way. We need to change what's happening. Otherwise, we're not going to have midwives in the future.
Yes, I was speaking with a friend of mine on an episode recently, and I homeschool my kids. And to homeschool, you have to unschool, you have to unlearn. They call it in midwifery, but we call it unschool. So if you think you've been doing that for 20 years, you do your own education. It is really hard to get that programming out. So if you're a midwife and you've done 5 years working in the hospital, then you go to the home birth and you're seeing completely different birth. There's a whole unlearning process that has to happen. And goodness knows how long that really takes, but it's going to take a lot of reflecting, a lot of hard work.
Totally.
It's
And support,
a
like
lot of support. Yeah.
we need to support the midwives who are wanting to do the home births and stuff. I remember for myself, so I left pretty much straight after my training and did an apprenticeship with one of the midwives back then. There weren't very many back then. And so the unlearning that I did then was outrageous. It was amazing. And the teachers for me were the women.
Yes.
And I got to see that birth happens in a million different ways, however it is for that woman. So not that there's a this happens and then this happens and then this happens, like
Yes.
crazy. So we
Yes.
need we need to do that. So back to that question that you asked me, I knew absolutely. And
Yes.
that was a big journey for me, because when I started my midwifery, I was very much a daughter of the patriarchy, and like I didn't question much. I didn't like it much. I felt less than because I was a woman and all of that, but
Mm.
that was the way it was. But that midwifery training really woke me up, because like I remember talking to a friend of mine. So this is So in my early 20s, so back in the early 80s, and she had a friend who was having a home birth, and she's telling me that they had candles there and all that. And so me as a 23-year-old just thought, oh my God, that's so weird. And then, like a few years later, that's where I was. So much unlearning. We're so brainwashed.
Yeah. It's true. And we're easily brainwashed as well to see things. I mean, look how the laws change and how society's changed over the last 40 years and 50 years ago, and the women didn't have rights and how that was normal and it was okay for DV and women not to have property and for those things to happen for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's been such radical change over the last 50 years. It's amazing, but it just goes to show that it can happen. And I think this is what gives me hope for home birth is I think I saw in Queensland Health, they were sharing a story just of a mother who was saved because her baby, she came 30 weeks, needed a cesarean, true medical emergency, needed help. That's an amazing story, but they're putting the doctors and that as a hero because they've had some terrible news press lately for some of the hospitals. But imagine if, and this is what I said on their post, imagine if you were sharing powerful stories or women's stories of positive experiences where they were the hero rather than the doctor's the hero once again. And if women understood that that could be their story, everyone would be kind of climbing up the mountain to try to get to the home birth, the birth center, whatever it is that gives them that powerful experience that has been taken out of our hands for so long.
Yeah, exactly. And the saddest thing is how few women realize that,
I know. It's
you
really
know?
sad.
Yeah. And a lot of our previous rites of passage are the setup for that. But shall I tell you about my births?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Okay.
please do. We
So my
digress.
first birth I was 27,
Hmm.
26, 27. I can't remember exactly, or maybe just 27. And I was having a home birth, and I ended up transferring to hospital after pushing for 4 hours, which I think was actually longer than that, and with no progress. And basically, I had a I had an in second stage cesarean, and it was called an emergency when it was not an emergency, but that's the way back then, and sadly now, an emergency cesarean from a quote failed home birth.
Okay.
So that was the
Mm.
terminology back then.
Mm.
And I I transferred to the hospital where I did my midwifery training, so I knew all the people. So it was quite confronting and humiliating because I
Mm.
had been the student midwife there saying, "This is all fuck, you're doing this bad." They used to tease me and call me Sister Squat. And this is back in the day when a registered nurse was called a sister. So this is
Oh,
ancient
interesting.
history.
Yeah.
So that was huge. And what happened for me, I think the biggest thing I realized about that cesarean or the biggest thing that happened was that I realized I felt really disappointed.
Mm.
Um, and the feelings and I recognized that the feelings I was having were familiar. And that got me pretty interested. And when I looked deeper, everything in my life to that point unraveled, where I was able to track back, when did I feel that before? When did I feel that before? And it was pretty obvious that I've been feeling that kind of way all my life. And I was able to track back to my early childhood medical trauma that I had. I was very, very sick and nearly died as a 4-year-old.
Mm.
And then I could see the patterns that developed from then on that resulted in this cesarean. And I started to kind of piece together all the factors and realized that I was feeling the same way in many other aspects of my life. So sexually, and also um, I could see the pattern playing out in the way that I behaved, which was quite um, what do I say, defensive and reactive.
Mm.
Like a cornered animal,
Powerless.
powerless, but I didn't think I was.
Mm.
So this is me to that point. This is me unraveling where I felt like that before and why. And basically, what I got to was that I was actually not trusting people or anything. So my thing was about not trusting anybody or anything, and therefore not surrendering. So that experience of that cesarean taught me about surrender and that I didn't do it. And I didn't know that I didn't do it, and I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So tracking it back to that early medical trauma, which was horrific, you imagine a 4-year-old in a hospital in 1962 with chest tubes coming out of me I had a dreadful um, pneumonia. I was
Mm.
one of the babies or children that the measles vaccination was created for because I got staph pneumonia as a complication of the measles.
Wow.
So imagine this little 4-year-old tied to the bed, lied to, oh, this won't hurt, or look over there, like horrible, right?
Oh.
So that was me as a 27-year-old realizing that I had decided that for my own safety, I would not trust anybody and I would never surrender. So there was a big surrender in having that cesarean, though, like totally, but it was more like a giving up. And, I felt that at the time. But then, so what happened 2.5 years later, after I'd done all the kind of shamanic, this is what taught me about the interconnected, like I wasn't just having a baby, I was having an experience that was a readout of my life so far. And I think that's a really important thing for everybody to remember that every rite of passage, whether it's well, every pregnancy and menopause, it's all the experience we have is a readout of our mindset, our beliefs, attitudes, and fears that are formulated from everything that's happened before. So when I had my first VBAC, 2.5 years later, I went there knowing that I hadn't done the surrender thing, but not really knowing, what would happen. And I remember clearly I was in the bath, like deep inside myself, and I realized I had to die to have this baby. And so I was kind of thinking, well, that would be pretty bad. And, should I die or the baby die or whatever? Little, probably a microsecond conversation with myself, no one
Mm.
realizing I'm even going through this process. And I just thought, okay, I'm prepared to die to give birth to this baby. And then later I realized that was the surrender. And so then the pushing urge came, and 2 hours of pushing later, I had my little baby girl. And then 3 years after that, I had my next VBAC in the pool, so a water birth, and new partner. And then I'm into it, and I'm thinking, probably 5 hours into it, and I'm thinking, I can't handle this. This is too much pain. I can't handle this at all. I need to go to the hospital and get an epidural. I can't handle it. And then I'm having this conversation in my head going, if I say to Shay and Cheryl, my midwife friends who are there, and Paul, I can't handle it. I need to go to hospital and have an epidural. No, I knew exactly what they would say. They'd say, oh, but you're doing so well, or maybe this
Hmm.
is transition. So then I realized, and this I realized later was the surrender point where I just thought, oh, I actually have to have a baby.
Yes.
And so what I did was completely focus on the part of myself that was hurting the most, which was my cervix, as it was opening not finally opening, the last parts of the opening.
Mm.
And it catapulted me into an altered state of consciousness where I felt zero pain. So I
Yes. I can
basically,
relate to this. Yes.
yes, awesome. So I had
Yes.
basically had an ecstatic birth. So I saw the surrender points at each of those places. And what I noticed was that each time the surrender happened, and there was only two, so experiment of two isn't very much, but the surrender Well, the first time I thought I had to die, and the next
Yes.
time I thought, oh, I've got to have a baby. So, it's a bit a bit of a gentler realization. So, yeah, and the two things I was thinking about, what were the two things that really made the difference for me in being able to have successful VBAC was to be at home
Hmm.
because that was definitely well, you don't have to dig too far to see that that's the place you most likely will have a VBAC, and to have my trusted midwives that I knew would not mess with me and get in the way and let all that. So trusted midwives and the water.
Yes. I had a surrender point too. I'm just realizing it now that you said it. And I had a similar experience where I was having a micro conversation and it was, this is excruciating. What kind of maniac does this? Why didn't I just have a surgery? And I'm looking at the birth support and I'm looking at them thinking, don't ever do this. This is crazy. Like, I'm having these conversations. And then I said to myself, okay, so what am I going to do? Am I going to go to hospital? And I said to myself, well, that's way more painful than just sucking this up right now, because I'd had the lived experience of a transfer to hospital from a previous birth. And I said to myself, no, you've just got to get through this now. And as soon as that happened, I dilate really quickly, so like 4 or 5 hours. As soon as the dilation was done, like you said as well, there was no pain and it was pleasurable. Sometimes I had 10 hours left of a malposition baby. I'll say not an optimal, not malposition, but just a high baby trying to get down. But that was very fine. I was laughing and joking throughout the experience. But I think that's the mindset. What you're saying is, with your first one, you couldn't go through because your mind was, you're blocking, but you surrendered the other times. And I surrendered at the start. So then it's just the body doing it, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying with
totally.
that?
Yeah, totally. Because, women in a coma have a baby,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
they've got no mind stuff happening.
Yeah.
The body works. There's one other thing I wanted to add to that cesarean that I had. The doctor who did the cesarean, who was a friend, he was our home birth transfer ally. He was like awesome. And on the table, epidural, paralyzed as from the waist down, etc., or however far down. And he said to me, "Oh, Jane, look, your ischial spines are way too close, so you'll probably never fit a baby out of there. So just save yourself the trouble and just have cesareans from now on." And fortunately, I was awake to the bullshit of that, and I know that he was probably just trying to make me feel okay.
Yes.
There's an anatomical reason why this didn't happen. We know you tried, but don't try again. So,
Yes. I hear that so many times from
mm,
women.
yeah,
Your pelvis is too small, your baby was too big.
yeah, and
La
that's
la la la.
complete bullshit because
Yeah.
all we didn't need to do is squat, and our pelvis opens 3 more centimeters.
Mm. It's amazing. The other thing that I took from your story was that it sounded to me like you were talking about a woman who liked to be in control, didn't like to relinquish control. And so, do you think that there's a difference between women who surrender naturally, who are more intuitive, and women who are trying to like force the world to happen? Like, I'm a control woman myself. Had to protect myself, do everything on my own, that sort of thing. And that birth experience for me, which was my first VBAC, my word was surrender. I had to surrender the whole whatever will be sort of thing. Do you think there's a difference in people that you see
Mm.
and you work with?
Well, totally, but you got to figure out what the reason is behind her need to control.
Okay.
So control is usually a trauma response.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's the tip of the iceberg, such that if one goes deeper, therefore examining the shamanic dimensions of the control and see the why, that's the information we need, rather than, oh, you just try to control everything, so you're going to end up having a cesarean. It's not like that. I think it's more like how we find, or not even how we find, how women can identify where they're at in terms of surrender and trust.
Yes.
And
Yeah. And
control is a trauma response to not to being powerless, as you said before.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. So true. Okay, so would you like to jump into some of these questions that I've got
Oh,
for us
yes.
today? Okay, so for women who feel disconnected or unsure how to tune into their inner wisdom, what practices or rituals can help them reconnect with themselves during pregnancy and birth preparation?
Well, I've got lots of suggestions here. So, what things I do, and I do this with women I work with, and I did this as a midwife, and I do these sorts of practices in my workshops for women. And basically, back to that shamanic processes, I recommend a journey into your womb to connect with the baby. So it's a bit like a guided meditation that ends up being a conversation with the baby. And you can just do it, or you can use the drum and do it as a drum journey. And I've got drum journeys on Spotify to do this, and it's
Have
a
you?
into your womb to connect with the baby.
Oh, beautiful. I
So
love that.
yeah,
I love
so
that. I think
available.
it's so important to connect with your baby,
Mm,
and it's just a beautiful practice that I just don't think many women are encouraged to do in mainstream, especially.
totally. And I don't think you can be disconnected or unconnected from your baby, but it's about bringing that level of connection that enables conversation.
Mm,
And that might be, I know women who actually physically talk to their babies and hear the baby
I'm
respond
one
in
of
their
them.
voice.
Yeah.
Yep. Or do it in a more of a meditation kind of a way, or just by being present around them to the signs that they see as the answers to their questions or whatever with the baby. But the shamanic journey process is really good. And then I also suggest that um, women figure out how to detect a yes or no answer with their body.
Yes, this is
And
so
so,
good.
yeah, so the easiest way is to try it, like
Mhm.
think of something that's a no and notice your body. Think of something that's a yes and notice the difference. So basically, just to shortcut that experiment, when it's a no, there's kind of a contraction in the body or a downwardness, and with a yes, it's more of an expansiveness or an opening. And if women practice doing that, they'll be able to tell the difference. And I think it's a fabulous tool to teach your children.
Yes, I think it is. And what I notice about myself and some of the women I work with is that we'll get the no, like it might, for me, it feels like a big no, like this, an explosion when I really don't want to do things. But immediately my brain says, you're being a bitch, you're being a mean person, just do it. It doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. Like because of the person's response and the person's reaction, and then the people pleasing tendencies. So an experiment might be good to see what happens, because I guess at the end of the day, the fears are this person won't like me, blah, 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 blah. But what actually will happen if you listen to yourself, it might not be any of those things. The person might just say, okay, cool, or sure.
Yeah, yeah. We project so much onto what might happen in our attempts to whatever it is our attempt to avoid confrontation, to be a good girl. Like so,
Yeah.
this way of knowing thyself, to know, say, for example, that you're fearful of confrontation, or that you've grown up learning that the only way to survive in your family is to be a good girl and be a people pleaser, then that it's really valuable to know these things about ourselves, because that's how we operate, and that's like our default behavior, which will come out when we're in challenging situations. That's the way it works. So
Mm.
so part of preparing for pregnancy, actually, rather than birth, but before, it's a really good idea to do our inner work to understand why we do what we do the way we do it. But
Yes.
more rituals and stuff. So um, one of the things that I suggest is to connect with, like, if this was happening before you got pregnant, then it would be to connect with your menstrual cycle. and be with the cycle all the way around from bleeding to ovulation. So the ascent, the peak, the descent, the blood, and understanding how different we feel every day and how our body talks to us through the menstrual cycle. And that's great preparation for birth, like if you can understand what your body's telling you to do when you're bleeding, then you can understand what your body wants you to do when you're pregnant and birthing and mothering. So I think it's
Yes.
practice. So that would be something to do before pregnancy, but during pregnancy, to actually slow down. And I remember when my friend told me that, slow down. I'm like, yeah, fuck off. I'm not going to slow down. I've got too much to do. But actually, slow down and in terms of connecting with the baby or ourselves, to calm our breath, use breath work, there's lots there, and calm our mind and actually make the space and the time to connect. You can go as far as you like with that, and you could just say, okay, at 10 o'clock this morning, I've got half an hour, and go somewhere where you won't be disturbed and get ready, decide what you're going to do before your hour, so you're not spending your hour trying to figure out what to do. But you can be as make a ceremony or a ritual, light a candle, call out to the baby, meditate, whatever, use the drum, listen to the drum on headphones, and just connect and spend as much time as possible focusing on your intuition, because that's the thing, and your instincts. So two different things. Your instincts are your animal instincts, your mammalian instincts that will, you know, if you're going to hospital to have a baby, it'll stop labor until you realize you're safe, for example.
Mm. Yep.
Or if you transfer and that's the scenario. But your intuition is something other than that. And it's the spontaneous, unexpected ideas that come to you about what you should and shouldn't do. So that's a great way to connect to yourself, to understand that you have a radar, and your radar works, and that we're animals, and animals have all kinds of senses to detect safety or danger, and we do too. So to practice that is really a powerful way to connect with yourself, because that's going to be step one before you connect with the baby, because then you know what connection feels like and looks like. And so there's other ways that I suggest in this process is to get helpers. So in the shamanic realm. So all traditional cultures have things like guides and teachers, and many people in our day and age have guides and teachers and animal allies or power animals. So it's a wonderful thing to have this kind of um, angelic help from angels, or um, maybe your long dead great grandmother who really helped you feel strong, or the wolf as your power animal who's going to keep you feeling safe and protected, or whatever. So this all sounds a little bit kind of, oh yeah, whatever, but if you bring those concepts into a modern day practice, animal allies, power animals, the medicine of them, the characteristics of them, the qualities of them are the qualities we need to bring for our own healing. And our guides and teachers, well, they're like the mystical guides and teachers that you can consult with about what to do or whatever. And I've got Spotify drum journeys for all of that as well.
Beautiful. And I've done all of those things. And for anyone thinking that sounds a little bit woo-woo, it's so powerful, because I had a wolf come up in one of my shamanic journeys, and I had a spiritual guide, an angel that I speak to regularly still. But it's just so nice to, and I also channeled my grandmother. I don't know if I channeled, but I feel like she came to me after I had my second baby, and I was just birth trauma, and I named my daughter after her, like the middle name. But I hadn't thought about her for so long, and all of a sudden she came to me, and then I started learning with the shamanic stuff, channeling my ancestors, and now I think about all the women that came before me, and it's so powerful that to know that they're there and they've handed down some wisdom and experiences to me, and powerful ones that
Mm.
always made me feel I may not have had a mother with me by my side in real life, but I had the spirits and knowing that there were people with me, which made me feel so powerful when I didn't have that in physical manifestation. So it is really
Fantastic.
powerful.
Yeah. And, you don't have to necessarily know how it works. It just works. And
Yeah.
if you think it's a bit woo and weird, it doesn't matter. It still works.
Yeah. It does. Because I was like, what? Okay. But you just got to open yourself up
Exactly,
and
which is
magical things
great
happen.
preparation for birth, to
It
open
is. Yeah.
yourself up. Yeah.
Yes.
And I just want to say that another thing could be that an aspect of our inner wisdom, which is part of what we need to connect with ourselves, is alive and well when we're pregnant. It's growing a baby. You don't have to figure out how to do that. That's an
No.
example of our body wisdom. And
Yes.
also, I would suggest a question, which would be to ask yourself, why do I feel disconnected? And see, maybe that could be a journal prompt or whatever. Or if you're unsure of how to hear your inner wisdom, practice. Practice listening to your impulses. You know, just we all get them. Do an experiment. Oh, okay, I heard that. I'll do that. See what happens. Or, watch and see what happens if you ignore it. I heard somebody saying it the other day as the Woolies voice. Woolies as in the supermarket. And
Ah.
that when you're in the aisles and you're going down and you think, oh, I should get that. I think I need that. And you don't, because you think, no, I don't. It's not on my shopping list. And you get home and you needed it.
Yes. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
There are times.
we are all intuitive. We all have inner wisdom. It's just whether you're blocking it or not. And the question is why.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's really good. I think, and I'm just remembering the movie The Yes Man. Have you ever seen that with Jim Carrey? So he's a no man, and then he's like challenged to say yes. And when he says yes, he starts actually living his life because he's truly saying yes to all the things that bring him joy and all these things. So imagine if we were saying yes when we really wanted to say yes, and not yes when we are just trying to people please, and then we feel resentful and we're like so exhausted because we're constantly doing things for others, but we're not saying yes to ourselves or saying no when it needs to be said.
That's big, like this is all part of dismantling our internalized patriarchy,
Yeah.
which is what's necessary right now.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
biggest clue for how to dismantle our internalized patriarchy, which you can't not have, is to listen to the stories you're telling yourself, especially the judgments you're making on yourself. That's your internalized patriarchy. So you just have to banish those thoughts, or
Banish them.
do the inner work to go dig deep, deep, deep to where did it come from, and then do the healing there. But you could just say, I'm not going to even think that. Like,
Yes.
you're so stupid. You're so this. You're so that. Like, that's the internalized patriarchy.
Yeah. So are there any more tools, or would you like to move on to the next
Yes.
one?
So I think that's kind of that. Some of
That
those.
was a lot of amazing tools and things for people to start working on, which is great.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking of all the things that I'm going to start working on. This has been very insightful.
Oh, great. Well, there's more to come in the questions if we go through them. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the next question is, how important is it for women to reflect on the beliefs they hold about birth?
Like the most important thing. Yeah. And that's because some of the beliefs that we hold are associated with fears that we have.
Mm.
And our fears change the way we behave and definitely interfere with labor and birth. Fear makes adrenaline, and adrenaline switches off oxytocin, which is the hormone that's running all the birth processes. So,
Mm.
oxytocin is what makes the contractions happen. So, what I do in my workshop, The Shamanic Dimensions of Pregnancy, is go through a process with the women that culminates in a letting go of fear fire ceremony. And so the process goes like this. And I would just suggest that everybody just do this and teach it to your children, because this is like so powerful. Because in order to have a fear, which is what underpins beliefs, right? In order to have a fear, you have to believe something. So it's kind of going one step back from the beliefs. So step one, acknowledge all your fears, write them all down. And don't buy into this bullshit of don't think about your fear or you'll make it happen. Like that's not true.
Thank you. That's like so powerful to saying that. I'm
Mm.
actually quite sick of hearing that. People blaming women for things that happen because they manifested it.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
So it's really important to acknowledge our fears because some of them you're just holding under and you're not really wanting to even look at them, and it's really gets scarier and scarier. But if you bring them out of the dark into the
Mm-hmm.
light, sometimes that's enough for it to go poof. It's like, oh my God, why would I be frightened of that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then so acknowledging your fear, and then the process goes that in order to have a fear, you have to believe something that enables the fear, or else you can't have it, right? So you have your fear, you say your fear, and then you think, okay, well, what's the belief that I have to have that fear? And it's pretty easy to figure out. And then you think, okay, do I believe that? And then it could be that you don't believe it. We've been fed so many fears and beliefs from the culture about childbirth that are absolute bullshit, for one. And you may have inherited them from your family, from your peer group, from your um, anything, everything. We inherit fears, and fears are catchy. So the beliefs that underpin it. So you figure out, do I believe that belief? If you don't believe it, you just get rid of the fear. You can't have it because you don't believe the thing you have to believe to have the fear. So there's
Mm-hmm.
one way it goes. If you do believe the belief you have to have the fear, then there's another opportunity, a fork in the road. And it goes, okay, so do I want to believe that? Is this really like an outdated belief? And if it is, and most of the time it is, then you have the opportunity to update your belief system so you can eradicate some of the fears. And then the last part of the process is, do I believe this belief? Yes. Do I want to believe this belief? Yes, it's true. Then that's your red flag. So, as an example, if you fear intervention,
Yep.
and then you're going to a hospital that has a 99% cesarean rate, then your fear is warranted. It's something for
Yes.
you to watch out for. So that's the process. And then the letting go part is to, before you let go of the fear, is to come up with a positive mantra or affirmation that counteracts the fear. So it could be like, I trust birth, or I trust my body, or I am safe, or whatever it is. And then you write your fears on a piece of paper and you burn it and you watch it disappear. And then you focus on your positive mantra or affirmation if ever that fear comes up again. And it possibly will. And so each time it arises, if it does, sometimes it's just gone. But if it does, then you remind yourself, I trust birth or whatever. And maybe you need to do that, go around in that loop again. Now, I really suggest that partners do this too. You don't want anybody to come to your birth who has unacknowledged fears that's making them behave in different ways to what they would have behaved like if they'd done this process. And I also think that it's really, really important for birth workers to do this process as well, because fear is catchy. It travels a pheromone, it travels a hormone traveling through the air. And in a birth space, if one person gets scared, pretty soon everybody is.
Hey, lovely. I just want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that's really special. Because if you're pregnant and planning a VBAC home birth, this could be exactly what you're looking for. My VBAC home birth mentoring program starts on the 3rd of March, 2025. And this is your chance to join a village of like-minded women who truly get what you're going through. This is a space where you'll feel supported, seen, and heard. We can soak up all the VBAC home birth wisdom, ask you questions without judgment, and build that deep, unshakable confidence in your birth choices. And here's the thing, the price will be going up later this year. So if you've been on the fence, now is the time to jump in. Head to ashleywinning.com/homebirth mentoring/ to find out more and join us. I can't wait to welcome you in.
So that's
Yes.
another thing. Don't invite anybody to your birth who has fears. So you've got to screen your support and your practitioners. So in an ideal world, you'd want to be interviewing your midwives and your doctors and whoever else and say, tell me what your fears are. You better deal with that before you help me, because that's not helpful.
Yeah. It's so true. I had a birth worker in my space and she had a fear right at the end. And I felt her fear. I have my fight and flight's very quick anyways. The contractions completely stopped. And then, there was no more contractions, retained placenta, postpartum hemorrhage.
Oh.
So while I know that it was because of that fear that came up from that person, there is still a fear for me that lingers. And I know this is a big one for women postpartum hemorrhage in a home birth. So while I know that 90% of that, there's like 90% this happened because of that experience, there's 10% of me thinking it could still happen anyways. And I know that it's potentially there, but I'm still trying to work with, could we work that out? Like do an example so people at home who want to do this work can see a real life example. We work through maybe that one.
Yeah, but take your midwife hat off.
Okay.
For the process, because this has to be for a woman doing this, because midwives are taught to fear that.
Yes.
Whereas, it's a possibility with lots of tools to use to avert it in the first place, and also to deal with it if it happens. So, that's the most important thing for mothers to know, that postpartum hemorrhage is it's a bit like cord around the neck, like these things can happen, and a lot of the times it's not a big deal. And what I mean by that is we have a liter extra blood in us when we're pregnant and before the baby comes out. So we can lose probably, I don't know, up to a liter, provided our hemoglobin is okay, which hopefully it is, and it not be an issue.
Yes.
So that's really important for everybody to know. You can lose, you can bleed, you do bleed.
Yes.
So that's important. Like, it's not like if any blood starts coming out that you're having a hemorrhage, it's part of the process. So then in terms of talking through the actual situation of a PPH, is that what you want to do? Or the fears?
Well,
okay. No,
yeah, letting the fear go, because I had a
Yeah.
3 liter postpartum hemorrhage. So it wasn't a 1 liter. It was like, you need to kind of get that resolved. So I understand if I ever happen, I could easily get myself to the hospital. It's a matter of if you have a midwife there, but a lot of the listeners will be free birthing as well. So it's, if you've got a midwife, the midwife is going to be able to handle that for you, probably with the right. I didn't have a midwife at my birth. And if you're free birthing, then you've kind of got to have all the tools and have someone do that for you, or you do it yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that that's really important for women contemplating a free birth. If you want to do more than just leave the experience up to fate, shall we say, or the mysteries or whatever, if you want to do the things that you can do, which women have been doing forever, ever, there are ways to, deal with these things should they arise. And I think that women, families contemplating free birth should have figured out how they're going to stop the bleeding if there is a bleed, and who's going to resuscitate the baby if the baby needs resuscitating. I think those are two very important considerations, and that the person who's responsible for the resuscitation to actually learn how to do that. Like, and this is not because you're being paranoid. This is about being what Billy Harrigan at the conference we went to said, it's about being a useful human.
Yes. She's given me so much food for thought, and because that is really a life-saving skill that anyone in any, like, regardless of a newborn or a baby, we should all probably know
that.
anyways.
We should do first aid at school.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
So,
Yeah.
yes.
But back to this fear process. So you
So I've got a
fear.
fear.
Mhm.
I've got a fear that I could have a retained placenta again, postpartum hemorrhage. So I'm going to write that fear down
Well, hang on, let's
and
go.
look at
So
it.
what's the belief you have to have?
The belief that I have is I know that I believe it was caused by somebody else, but maybe because I have red hair, some red in my hair. Apparently, people with
Yeah.
red hair bleed more. And I'm plus size, which can also put me at higher risk of. And there's a belief that perhaps I'm doomed to never have a easygoing home birth or vaginal birth.
Hmm.
There's that. There's a few different beliefs there,
Okay.
I suppose, that
Let's
I'm
go
holding
on.
on to.
Yeah, let's go on to let's talk about the belief that someone else caused it.
Okay.
So, do you believe that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. So, you believe that other people can cause PPHs for women.
I believe that births can be disturbed, the hormones can be stopped in a home birth, and then the process stops without any medication uh if you can't get the process going again. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a true belief for you. And like,
Yes.
let's put our midwife hats back on. It's a reality, right? That's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So therefore, you believe the belief, so it's a real thing. So therefore, what would you do in terms of getting that's the red flag. Other
Mm.
people can do things that disturb the birth, and a disturbed birth, like, that's the usual reason for a PPH is a disturbed birth, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's pathology. So therefore, given that you acknowledged your fear, you figured out the belief you have, you believe it, then what are you going to do about it?
Well, my next choice would be either have a midwife who's trained to resolve that if it happens, or I take more control of my birth. I know you said control, but I I check in with myself in birth and say to myself, do I think this is an emergency? Do I think is this me or is this the other person?
Mm.
And if it's the other person overreacting because I know enough anyways, then I just release it and I go back to my oxytocin state. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's a hard thing to maybe do
Okay,
during
but this
birth.
is like, yeah, what you're doing is you're planning for the future, right? So
I
not like
am.
a
Yeah.
retrospective thing. So if you if you realize that, so the belief taught you, well,
Yeah.
reminded you that other people can affect your birth by disturbing it, then what would you do about that factor?
I mean, I had lots of conversations before with that person about, I'm not sure. What's the
Hmm.
answer?
Well, the answer I would guess, I mean, I can't give you your answer, but what I would
Yeah.
say is if you were having another baby and that you would think more clearly about who you were inviting there. You would
Yeah.
screen them more thoroughly.
Screen them better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there were times in my intuition that it was a no, but I was carrying forward. So
Yeah.
it would be going back to that start process, wouldn't it? And if I had a no throughout the pregnancy care, because there was a lot of no's throughout that pregnancy care,
Mm.
that probably should have been me moving forward with somebody else, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So if you
Yeah.
paid attention during the pregnancy that you were
Yes.
getting, this is really not the right person for me, you
Yes.
have to change. Like otherwise
Yes.
you're ignoring something really big
This
because
is
your body's
powerful.
right. Your
Yeah.
body. Yeah, like just remember we're animals. Think about how dogs and cats react to people.
Yes.
Same for us.
Yeah.
If we don't kind of go, oh, something wrong with me, not them, and I'm
Yes.
this, and I'm useless, and they're clever, and blah 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 blah. But
Yes.
yeah, so this process is about something that's to come or has happened.
Yes.
So, yeah, and obviously in the moment, I mean, one of the biggest things that can happen during a labor is that everything stops or the woman feels stuck, for example, or whatever. And
Mm.
the most powerful question to ask there is, what are you fearful of? And then all kinds of things come out of her mouth or whatever. And then you've got something to work with. So this is as a birth worker or as a support person, like,
Yes.
or for the mother to just acknowledge what's going on and realizing that you can't ignore a fear. Your body won't let you. You're an animal.
Yes.
It's about
This is
survival.
so this is where some women get stuck in their birth when the fear is perpetuating in their mind and they're having the conversation with that fear, right?
Mm,
Okay.
totally. Yeah.
So the work needs to be done in pregnancy, ideally, and then they can use the tools in labor because
Exactly.
they've been using it so much through
Totally.
pregnancy.
That's it.
Okay.
And the work actually needs to be done before pregnancy.
Yeah.
Actually, at menarche, if we welcome our daughters into womanhood in an empowering way and then support them through that as they grow up, they're not going to roll over and in the birth suite and say, yeah, whatever you reckon. They're going to
Yeah.
say, you sit over there, I'll call you if I need you.
Yes. Or as my daughters say, Mummy, I'm having a home birth.
Beautiful.
Okay, so we're done with the beliefs then.
With the beliefs, but I've got
Yeah,
some questions
sure.
prompts that women could use to bring out this information. Hang on, maybe I've jumped to the next question. I have.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question is, journaling is often suggested as a tool for reflection. What prompts the questions do you recommend women explore when reflecting on their previous births or preparing for a VBAC?
Okay. All right. So, reflecting on their previous births, I've just written down a few. So I hope you can go and get. Are you getting a transcribe of this? You could maybe
I
put them.
will. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll transcribe and put them in the blog. Yeah.
Okay. So, do the feelings I have when I reflect on that birth, whichever one you're reflecting on, feel familiar? Have I had these before? If so, how old do I feel? And what do I need? So my example at the beginning of like, I feel 4 years old. What does a
Yes.
4-year-old need? It wasn't
Yes.
a 27-year-old that was actually running the show. It was a 4-year-old, this is all basically inner child work, really, because, that's what's running our lives. So that question, and then to ask what I need, and then kind of go deeper with a question and answer situation with whatever arises. Like, you're having a conversation with your inner self there, and just keep going, keep going, keep going. And then the other question is, when I had intervention or trauma began, when things went off the rails, so to speak, in my labor or birth, what did I actually need?
Mm-hmm. That's a really
Because,
good one.
yeah, because as I always say, in the next birth, you will return to the scene of the crime. So it's good to know ahead of time what you needed then so you can bring that there for next time.
Yes.
Okay.
So powerful.
And hang on. So yeah, when that intervention happened, what did I need? And then to ask, is this a pattern in my life? So you start to see, oh my God, it's connected to that and that and that. And then you're getting the reasons why.
Yes.
And then this is a big question, and I'm, sure it's going to be confronting for lots of people, but anybody who's a home birth midwife knows the power of this question. Did I really commit to a natural process of birth, or did I say as natural as possible?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not talking about emergencies. That's a different thing.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
how often women say, oh, I'll give it a go and I
Mm.
just want to do it as naturally as possible. Like, that is an opening for being really influenced by other people's fears.
Yes. And I talk about it in a way of really committing to the thing and being honest with yourself, because you have to have commitment. You can't say, I'm planning a home birth, but I can always get an epidural. you can, but is that real? Is that what you don't do that in a home birth? You have to say, really, I think you have to say to yourself, I can do this. I can, what are the tools that can really help me? Because as humans, and I think Rhea Dempsey says it so well, like when she talks about the epidural, it's like a person trying to lose weight and you're on a diet, but then you've got Tim Tams in the fridge and ice cream and chocolate bars, and you might last a day, but you aren't going to last many days with that temptation sitting there, are you? And it's kind of like that's the temptation when you're in pain and you feel
Yeah,
like you need something to rescue you.
exactly. And I think, as I've written in my book, 10 Moons, I think, I hope, if women realize the impact that an epidural and any other pain relief drugs have on the baby, surely they wouldn't choose it. So I think it's really important that we all understand that what we are doing when we're having a baby is not just for ourselves and whether we can get through it or not or whatever. It's creating that person who's being born's birth imprint, which
Mm.
will stay with them forever. And there's lots of data about this. If people going, oh, bullshit, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 go research the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. And they've done a lot of work to learn about and talk about the effects of labor and birth on the individual when they grow up or as they grow up. And so, in an emergency, it's an emergency.
Yes,
And it's not an emergency, let's not make it one.
yes,
So I feel it's really important that women know the effects of their decisions on the baby. This is not to guilt trip anybody,
yes.
but it's like if we withhold that information from mothers, then we're lying to them. And there is a lot of work that people can look at on primalhealth.org, which is an incredible database created by Michelle O'Donnell, who's
Oh, yeah.
the most awesome guy.
Yes.
And he goes through and he outlines all the different kinds of things that can happen in labor and birth and pregnancy and how that can affect the baby. And surely we want to know this. Surely.
I think so. Mothers want the best for their babies, and I think if they have the truth, then they can make informed choices. And
Totally. And this is
yeah,
part of the truth.
yeah, it
And it's
is
not very
the hidden
popular or
truth.
savory,
No,
but it's
it's
the
not.
reality.
It's a lot of denial, and people talk about science deniers, but they're denying science with their
Totally.
journals. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
works when it works for them, but when it works against, they don't want to talk about the science, sadly.
Hmm. And that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for everybody who's thinking, oh, fuck you. You're telling me I did a wrong thing by my baby by having an epidural. I had an epidural with my first baby,
Yeah.
and I can see how that plays out for him.
I've got two epidural babies and one free birth, and she's wild as sin. She knows herself and she's already whole. Like she doesn't need anyone's approval. It's so weird how I think she was just this wild soul that came. But yes, I think it had to do with her birth and her knowing how she was going to be born and
Mm.
being, yeah. And
Yeah,
my
and it's
firstborn, she's a nervous wreck.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that won't be just because of the birth, but that's the seed at the beginning.
Yeah.
Our birth imprint plays out all the time. We don't necessarily give birth how we were born, but lots do, but
Yeah.
not necessarily. But our birth imprint plays out whenever we birth things, so creatively, or whenever we are engaged in a process, anything that has a beginning, a middle, or an end. So in the School of Shamanic Womancraft, we work on this birth imprint. It's huge. And the birth imprint is obviously a connection between the mother's story and the baby's story. And, you got to get your story to figure out why those two people joined together. But, like the story I tell myself is that we choose our mothers and fathers for the life
Yes.
that we will have. And so that means we chose our mothers. And I chose my mother because I wanted to have the life that I have. And so what that meant was that I was completely influenced by all of the choices that she made, which in many, many, many ways were incredibly detrimental to me.
Yes.
They taught me many, many things that have been in my toolkit. So a it's not a bad thing. It's not a curse. How we were born is not a curse. It's simply a pattern to come to recognize and figure out how to work with it rather than be worked by it. So your daughter who's a nervous wreck, when she's old enough to do the figuring out of all of this, and an adult actually, because I think it's way too much to give this information to our children. Oh, you were a forceps delivery. You're always going to need help dragging you out of places or whatever, like that
I
would
was
be
a forceps baby. Yeah.
that would be the worst thing to tell somebody growing up, right?
Yeah, it would
Like,
be.
you notice, and even babies who were born from an easy birth, what they grow up thinking is things like, how come everybody makes everything so complicated?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is it's really important to give your baby the best possible chance. Now, having said that, my mother smoked all the way through her pregnancy, which is like so bad. We know
Mm.
that, right? And we've got ultrasounds of babies when of smoking mothers. And even when the mother thinks of having a cigarette, the fetal heart rate goes up and movements, rapid movements. And then when she has a cigarette, the baby's just like, not getting so much oxygen. So I had that.
Mm.
And then I had this like dreadful cocktail of what was called twilight sleep back in the day. So
Oh,
bad they
yeah.
don't do it anymore. So that was what
Mm.
my mother had. And so I had that. And then she was a mothercraft nurse back in the 50s. So she was a professional at looking after newborns with the kind of thoughts they had back then, which, they're fucked, like really bad. Feeding babies
What was it? Was it
Tharax,
the, yeah,
the
Tharix
cereal
and
Tharax from like
condensed
6
milk or
weeks
something?
old. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, she breastfed me, but condensed milk
Okay.
would have been the option, not
Yeah.
formula, condensed milk. Like
Yeah.
there are so many sick people who were raised on condensed milk, with incredible allergies and autoimmune stuff. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that was my experience,
Mm.
and that's it. That hasn't inhibited me from becoming who I am. That has made
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a great turnaround too from feeling victimy as to like for my whole life, I felt really my parents are the way they are, and why couldn't I have the perfect family and la 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 la. To I've chosen these parents. I haven't come up with a reason why I chose them, but the only reason I keep coming back to is because I'm having three daughters and I had to have that lived experience so I could be the mother that they needed. I'm going to talk to them about periods. I'm going to do all the things that I missed out on with my mum that I felt so sad about. I remember, and it feels painful for me, but there's so much joy in being able to be the mother for them that I would have wanted for me.
Fantastic.
Um,
Well, that's healing.
it is
That's healing
healing.
your red
Yeah.
thread. Someone's got to do it, and you did it
Yeah.
as a reaction or a response to the trauma that you experienced. You healed it. So, and that is a wonderful story. It's not a story of like, that your parents failed you or anything.
Yeah.
They did the best they could.
They did. Yeah, they do. They do because they come from their story. And then
Exactly.
you hear their story and you think, no wonder,
And
and
then
there's
you've got to
so many
listen to the
people.
story before that of the
Yes.
grandparents, and like, we're doing well by
Yeah,
doing what we're doing these days. So I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody. I'm just trying to give them the
that's
whole
right.
cause and effect situation. Because when we
Yes.
understand, we can do better.
It's true. I remember I spoke, Dr. Sarah Buckley was talking about the effects. This is the worst scenario. Then it got better and better. And I was like, the worst and the next one up. And I was just sitting in the workshop, like tears, like there's nothing I could do about it, but it was just so hard to hear it all. But then I could say, well, what can I do better next time? And
And what can
that's
I do to support this child?
what can I do? Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are the things.
Mm.
Um, cool. Well, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
How can women create space to honor and process the full spectrum of emotions that often come up when preparing for a birth after a challenging or traumatic experience?
Well, the first thing is feel the feelings.
That's
You know?
hard sometimes, isn't
I know,
it?
but there's no shortcut. If you don't feel the feelings, they don't go away.
So, how do you feel the feelings, Jane? This is something I would love to know.
You let it happen. It's like a wave. So let it rise. I mean, maybe get yourself somewhere where you're going to be safe. Don't do it while you're driving. Don't
Yeah.
do it while you're cooking the dinner because
Yeah.
you're going to poison the dinner. Get yourself into some sort of situation where you feel safe enough to just let it come and let it rise and bear witness to it. Get into the witness perspective. So what that means is you're in a state where you can notice, you're noticing that you're thinking something, or you're noticing that you're feeling something. So there's two things going on, the witness and the experience. And so feel the feeling, and it's going to be like a wave. It'll come on and it'll be like a contraction or a surge. It'll come on, it might go peak and come down, or it might build to a peak and come, whatever it's going to do, but just watch it and it will pass. And then it might happen again, but it's going to be like a wave. And so feeling the feelings, see, the thing is, in our culture, feelings have been pathologized. You're sad, then, you're down, then you're depressed, and then you've got depression. Now, I'm not challenging clinical depression. I'm just saying the normal down. That's normal. That's very normal. If we understand the wisdom of the cycles, we know that there is a down part of it. And that's not, you're not excited. You're inward and feeling like less energy than you are when you're high and up. So high and up isn't good. It's just high and up. Down and inner is not bad, it's just down and inward. So feeling the feelings, realizing that in our culture they've been pathologized and medicalized. And
Yes.
don't worry, there's drugs to fix it, which don't fix it, right? You got to remember that these anti-anxiety and anti-depression depression drugs, they'll take the edge off things. And if you need that because you're in an emergency, then do it. But if you understand that feelings come and go and that it's natural to feel down sometimes, then that would be helpful. And
What about those thoughts that come up during that time? That is that when we should be doing journaling at that time, Jane?
so you meaning like intrusive thoughts as
Intrusive thoughts of, you might be feeling sad because you had an argument with your partner or your family said something to you or something like that, and you're circling in your head. Is that where you do some breath work or some journaling and normalize that it's okay to feel sad?
Yes, that'd be a great idea, but you could also keep the conversation going. Why do I feel so sad? And see, like this whole thing about the shamanic dimensions of the feeling. Like, have I ever felt like this before? Yes. When was the last time I felt like that? Like a minute ago or yesterday?
Mhm.
So, what we can do when we examine our feelings and realize that they're common or a pattern to it is to do the inner work and realize it's probably our default behavior from our childhood trauma.
Mm.
And that's where we need to do the work. It's with the childhood trauma that's impacting us all the time. It can't not. So when you can have awareness that this feeling of deep despair and sadness that comes up when somebody says I've done something wrong, or I've disappointed them or whatever, it's not going to be because of that. Intensity of that feeling is not due to that conversation. That's
Yeah.
something from forever ago that is
Yes.
trying to get your attention to heal that wounded child. And the way to do that, there's so many ways to do that, but that's the thing that needs to get your attention. And also so in the moment, the sort of first aid, the emotional first aid is to calm your nervous system.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to do that in the moment with different breaths, but this is known as the best one. So it's called the sigh breath, and it's to Breathe in, and then breathe in more, and then blow out slowly out of your mouth. Let's do it again. Breathe in, and more, and slowly out of the mouth. Do you feel that?
Yes.
Takes
It's
you into
almost, I'll tell you what it feels like. I want to be honest to everyone because I use food to eat, like emotionally calm myself down. I'm trying to escape feeling bad, and it gives you a high feeling. That's almost like that feeling. It's the same thing, except for food makes you drop, whereas this doesn't.
So it accesses the parasympathetic nervous system, so it calms you down. So you just do it as many times as you have
Okay.
to calm down.
Okay.
And there's herbs that you can be drinking or taking that can calm your nervous system down. But if you've got a hyperreactive nervous system, it's not because of what somebody just said to you a minute ago.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a clue to the work you need to do to heal yourself. And another thing to calm your nervous system down is don't drink coffee.
I love coffee. I have
I
to
love
stop
coffee too,
coffee.
but
Is
is it
it
worth
okay? So don't drink coffee because that is not good for your nervous system.
it? It excites you, so you want to avoid. If
Yeah.
you're already hypersensitive, hypervigilant, hyperreactive, you do not need stimulants
Okay.
to take you over the edge.
So this inner child work that you're talking about, where can, if someone wants to do some more of this, do you have something in a book or is there a workshop or something people can go to?
Yes, so this is deep work, obviously. And the thing that we have available are sessions, private sessions that you can do with women that I've trained in the modality of shamanic womancraft, where you go into your childhood trauma and basically you figure out what coping mechanisms you came up with as a child. So, first of all, you have to identify the situation or experience you had as a little person, like from in utero till about 7.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that is just a repetition of what has already happened. So, it's the Jungian process. It's called the sacred wound. And you render your childhood trauma sacred by asking, how does this serve? How did this make me who I am? So,
Yeah.
looking for how it made you who you are. So basically, what you figure out is, and you could just do it over your whole childhood rather than individual incidences, but what you want to figure out is what coping mechanisms did you come up with as a little person to navigate what was going on? Like, did you hide? Did you become a people pleaser? Did you become somebody who just disassociated the whole time or whatever? You'll know. And then those become our default behaviors, which means we default to them whenever our childhood trauma is triggered or reactivated. And that happens like however many times a day, actually. So it's necessary to know, oh God, here I am, I'm doing that thing again. I'm 4 again. And then you've got to soothe your 4-year-old.
So yeah, I'm noticing mine is definitely hiding. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
That's
how you deal
interesting.
with your childhood trauma, which is probably responsible for the intense feelings that arise for us that have affected our nervous system. Because the nervous system we have now is because of what's happened before.
Yeah.
And then in terms of other things to do to be able to honor and process all those emotions, talk to someone. Go and be in a women's circle. Women's circles are so powerful. And if you can't find one, that's the goddess's invitation to you, or not necessarily invitation, demand of you to make one.
Mm.
Have a doula or a midwife. Talk through all this stuff, like it's, and body work, because everything's stored in the body. So you can actually approach all of this through body work.
So when you say body work, you mean like Reiki or
Anything.
chiropractic, massage,
Everything.
everything, anything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever would be good. You'll know.
Okay.
Everybody
Yeah.
will know. Oh, I don't like massage, but I might be able to go to a
Acupuncturist,
reflexologist or a what?
like briefly, acupuncturist.
Acupuncturist,
Yeah.
all of those things. So acupuncture is obviously a different thing. That's about aligning your energy flow and all of that kind of thing, and that will help you get into more of a kind of energetic balance. So that's more of a medicine as
Okay.
such, But when I'm saying body work, I'm meaning people's hands on your body and how that affects whatever's going, because like we know that the body holds the score, right? There's a book written about it, and there's a whole new trauma specialty, and we know that the body stores trauma, and so body work can be one of the ways to start to gently move that.
What was that book called? The
The
Body
body
Knows the
holds
Score,
the score.
holds the score.
Yeah, it's by a psychiatrist, and his
Oh,
name is missing me right now. It's very famous. He's
I'll
famous.
I'll put
Yeah,
it
you'll
in
find
there.
it. The body holds the
Cool.
score. And then, the work of Gabor Mate about trauma and how it's stored in the body, that so the other guy who's done a lot of work on this is Porges is his last name, Porgas, and he's the teacher of this other guy or work or ally here of the other guy who wrote Body Holds the Score.
Interesting. It's
Mm.
amazing, isn't it?
Mm.
Just how much goes into it.
Totally.
So I think we went through all
Yeah, all
the
the
emotions and
ways.
that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the next one is for women struggling to trust their bodies or the process of birth after a previous cesarean. How can they cultivate self-trust and a sense of confidence as they prepare for the next birth? I
Right.
feel like we may have covered some of it,
Yeah,
but
I've got
maybe
some
you've got
things
some
here to
more.
say. Yeah. Well,
Right.
I would just suggest that women explore trust as a concept, like as a way of being in your life. And like, who do you trust? Why do you trust? Why don't you? Do you trust yourself? Like, just journey with trust and figure out what makes you trust, what makes you not trust, what all of that. And ask yourself, why don't I trust myself? Like that is a big question that if you really sit with it, ideas will emerge as answers for that. So that's kind of like like a process that you'd want to do. And you could do it on your own, you could do it with somebody, but take notes if you're doing it on your own, because why don't I trust myself? That was a huge thing for me, trust. Like my mother was sexually abused as a child, and she taught me to not trust anyone.
Yeah.
And I know she did that to protect me, but
Mm.
that's a fucking heavy thing to grow up with, not trusting anybody, because it also included myself. So I had to
Yes.
I had to realize that I was doing that.
Mm.
And then it's just a process, okay, can I trust this? Can I trust this? Can I trust it? Am I, so it's journey with trust. And we may need in order to cultivate self-trust and confidence, you may need to do healing work on previous trauma to build our trust muscle.
Mm.
Like, so I just give another example. I, like so many of us, was terrified to go to the dentist.
Mm.
And, like, just, I don't even want to think about it too much because I can really bring it up. But what it has taken me to trust my dentist is huge. And that impacts everything in my life too, because it's not just about being trusting a dentist. So look for the experiences that you've had where you have built trust and figure out what you did and build that trust muscle in whatever way, like, and especially with yourself. So one of the ways you could do that is to practice doing things where you can test your trust and build the trust. So make decisions about things and then assess the outcome and see whether that was, something you could trust, or engage with yourself and notice to see what's in the way of you trusting. Like,
Mm.
so I thought something will pop up like, oh, you can't trust redheads. They'll bleed. Like, what could be further from the truth? And what when does bullshit become a spell?
Mm.
Because I was taught that in my midwifery training. Redheads bleed. So guess what happens? You expect something to happen, and you
Yeah.
you do like so. Examine what's in the way of like preconceived beliefs that may be influencing whether you trust something or not, which will have a reason. It may not even be in your life. It could have been in your mother's.
Yes.
My mother taught me to not trust men. That's
Yeah.
quite a problem.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard work, but it's worth it doing the work because I'm just thinking about all the things that I had to do to overcome. Like I was told all through my second pregnancy because I'm a bigger woman that it's going to be hard for me to birth. And that's from the doctors telling you the whole pregnancy. That's, by the time I had my next baby, I was even bigger. But how did I get over that? I had so much belief in myself. And I think it was more my lack of belief in them and more my belief in all the women before me. And yeah, I think it really is so important to believe in ourselves because I've been, we literally limit out at where our belief is. Like that's as far as we'll get in our lives. We will get what
Mm,
we believe we deserve. And that
mm,
is, I I have had to work so hard. I didn't believe that I was worthy of being friends with certain people because I felt that they were more worthy than me. So
mm.
therefore, I pulled myself back. But then when I made myself aware of that and I realized that maybe I am worthy of that and that they are a person, I had help. I had a mentor that helped me through this. But how powerful now that I feel that I can take up people's time and they want to be there with me. I mean, that's a huge thing to work through.
Huge. And you did it.
Yeah. And I did it. And there's so much more to keep going. But I guess it's the little steps that we need to take,
Absolutely.
get us to that point of
Yeah.
testing things. I mean, I also looked at all the things that were great with my body. So while I'm bigger, I'm fat, I conceive first try. So it's like, well, they say that it can be really hard. So if that's not true, what else isn't true that they believe?
Mm. Exactly.
And
Well, just be sure to remember that the medical beliefs, truths 10 years ago are different to now. And in
mm,
10 years, they'll be different again. It's
yes,
just what happens. The other
yes,
thing that I would say is to ask ourselves the question, what would it take for me to be confident?
mm,
And then that's an exploration. And, maybe it'll be different for each or many situations. So you're exploring your psyche. And
mm,
the other thing that I would add to how to cultivate self trust and build confidence is this concept of the helpers, the power animal, and the guides and teachers.
yes, bringing them in. I love that. This is really insightful. Some really great things to think about here, Jane.
Good.
We've got one more question if
Yeah, I
you got
do.
time. Yep,
Right.
okay. So do you have some tips for women creating rituals in their lives? I know women are busy and they say to me all the time, I don't have 5 minutes to do this, or I don't. And I know that's not true, but how do we create rituals and make space for them?
Hmm. Well, just to say that you probably already are. Like humans do rituals all the
Yes.
time. And so, like, for example, how you put yourself to bed, you'll have a ritual. You'll do this and then you'll do that. And
Mm-hmm.
after you floss your teeth, then you brush them, then you go like, so you will have, everybody will have, or how you get up in the morning, what's your step by step. So that's a ritual, but it's probably unconscious.
Yes.
So we can simply turn the rituals we're already doing into because basically what we're saying is to turn a task into a sacred ritual. So all you have to do that is to bring more attention and intention
Mm.
to what you're
Yes.
doing. So that's just to do it to what you're already doing. But if you want to go next level with it, then there's the process. So you would decide to begin, and then you would purify yourself, cleanse yourself. And then in different ceremonies, different people do different things. They use smoke from sage or Palo Santo or eucalyptus leaves, or there's sprays that clear your energetic field so that you're 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 not carrying fears and baggage with you to start. And then you could start by lighting a candle. And as you light the candle, you set an intention. And the ritual might be that I sit here and connect with my baby for 5 minutes. And then start by bringing yourself present. And you could light the candle and say, I call myself fully present, and I'm going to connect with my baby now. And then do something to connect with the earth below, feel your feet on the ground, and maybe imagine sending roots down like a tree. And then imagine being a tree and having branches high in the sky. So you're connected below and above. And then you go inside and connect with the baby in that way. So for other rituals, which are so easy and so important to do, at the end of every day would be a gratitude ritual where you just have your little journal on your bedside table, take a moment and you write down all the things you're grateful for. Like that'll actually make you feel good. So
Yes, it
rituals that make you
does.
feel good are
Yes.
really important. And another thing you could do is actually even make an altar. And it could be on a bench top, or the top of a fireplace, a mantelpiece, or wherever. And make sure you visit that daily and light a candle, bring something from nature that's beautiful to put on it. And when you visit your altar, to just let go of whatever's been driving you nuts or whatever, and breathe and set an intention like, I'm going to move forward in this day with full presence or whatever. And you could also do that altar outside in nature and do all this stuff with your children. You need to teach them how to do this. And then um, you can use the lunar cycle to do rituals. You can let go at the dark moon. You can plant new seeds for what you want to grow at the new moon. At the full moon, you give thanks for what's fully illuminated, or you dedicate the energy of fullness to whatever. And then doing rituals with our blood, with our menstrual cycle, the spiritual practice of menstruation, to collect your blood and return it to the earth and give thanks for your blood and let go of all that no longer serves. The more specific you can be, the better, and call in what you want for the next cycle. So, that's a much better thing than just flushing it down the toilet, for example.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I
Um,
was just feeling so lit up when you were speaking about all of those, Jane. Beautiful.
so easy.
Yes, so easy and so enriching though, because we go from task to do, but there's no intentional, often space to reflect and just be focused on that. And what the reason why I say this is because when I do these things, I feel so calm and so grateful and so happy, and so probably how I should be 95% of the time. It's
So
just
with that,
so
that's an
peaceful.
inspiration then,
Yes.
like
So
it works or
I
how you
do.
feel, then just set an alarm on your phone
Yes.
and do it.
Yes. It definitely inspired me. I'm so looking forward to it.
And as well, a lot of the stuff I'm teaching, sharing happens in the Four Seasons journey. So in Australia, there's a year-long program in the School of Shamanic Womancraft where you go deep into all of this stuff, especially the childhood stuff and your rites of passage. And there's also an online program that does all of this too, because it's something that requires guidance and support to do this work. So the School of Shamanic Womancraft has got all kinds of offerings that are helpful in that way.
And I'm going to be putting the link in for everyone so they can go to your website and also check out your books, because you've got a lot of books that women can read.
Yes.
Two of them that I've particularly pulled out were Her Story and also 10 Moons. Can you recommend any others from this conversation we've
Yeah.
had?
Thank you. Yes. So, blood rights, the spiritual practice of menstruation, is a great one. And also for those of you who have daughters approaching menstruation, I've written a little book called Becoming a Woman, a guide for
Oh,
girls
beautiful.
approaching menstruation. And if you're going to get that, I suggest that you read it yourself first before you give it to your daughters so you know what to talk about with them.
Yes.
And for younger ones, I've written a book called Mother Nature's Wisdom, which is all about teaching the children. Well, you don't have to teach the children, they already know it, but the wisdom of the cycles. And what else have I got? There's the spinning wheels and the menstrual cycle charting books. And I've got an app, the Spinning Wheels app, which is the first
Awesome.
holistic period tracking app that also connects you to the lunar phases and what to do about it, and the earth seasons and what to do about it, and your life seasons and what to do about it. So
What was that called?
spinning wheels.
Spinning wheels.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling like I need to come into your world and spend some time here because there's so much wisdom, so much to learn. Thank you
And it's
so
actually
much.
more about remembering than learning.
Yes. Yes, I love this show called Outlander. I don't know if you've seen it, but the main character, she is in the 1800s, she's a medicine woman with the herbs, and I just love it so much because I feel so connected to those women. And there's women dancing around these special rocks at in Scotland, and I just think those were women that I was connected to, and they're my ancestors, and I feel like we're missed out on so much in this modern world. We've lost so much that was sacred and special and women's stuff. And
That's it. And that's what my work's all about,
yeah,
reclaiming feminine knowledge, wisdom, and power, and an earth-based spirituality, so that when you're dancing around in those sacred stones, you're doing it at a time that opens a portal where you can
yes,
do magic.
yes. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. I feel so full of love and light right now. Is there anything else you would like to share before you head off today?
Well, just to say thank you, Ashley, for doing this and providing this space for women who are contemplating or planning or whatever a vaginal birth after cesarean, because I think that that is such a potentially scary place that, everybody else out there in the world's telling you, no, don't do it, you'll explode or something stupid. So I think that it's really important to hold this area where women can can hear an alternate perspective to vaginal birth after cesarean. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I hope today's story inspired you to trust your body, own your choices, and embrace the power of birth. If you loved this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another mama who needs to hear this. Do you have a VBAC Homebirth story to share? I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on ashleywinning.com or on Insta at AshleyLWinning. Until next time, take care and trust your body.